automatic buttons. As you can see, yeah, this is when I want to scare people. As you can see, there are a number of us here in the English conference room, which is really nice. I think I'm just going to teach from here from now on, except I don't want these other annoying people here because I have to wear a mask. So we are here, we are gathered together on this solemn occasion to talk to this young lady. Let me zoom in again. I love this. It really is the best. Whoop. Yeah, there we go. That's a little more.
Yeah, just keep it above the. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so we are here to talk to Holly Martyn, but we will talk to you about names and about pseudonyms and how you choose a professional moniker and that sort of thing. Because one of the exercises we're going to do as the semester goes along is writing pseudonymously and writing anonymously, and what the writer's identity means to the work, and and that kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, we should talk about that at some point because that came up for me.
Yeah, no, I know it did. And so, what does the name mean, and stuff like that? Because I remember you going through choices, and finally landing on Holly Martyn.
Right. Well, and part of it too was I was
is,
getting divorced, right? So I
right.
I was not going to have his last name, but I didn't change it right away. Like I kept it for a few years, and then when I was writing my memoir, and I was very sensitive about, and it had a lot of family dirt in it, I felt sensitive that I wanted to protect my family, and at the same time, I didn't want to go. I felt my maiden name was going to expose the family. I didn't want to keep the ex-husbands, and so I also wanted a name that was uniquely mine. And I ended up deciding to take my great-grandmother's maiden name, which is Martyn. And I had someone in the family had done a family tree, and I had like all these last names I could pick from. And my great-grandmother Rose Martyn, and it just kind of spoke to me. And then I also did the practical side of it. I Googled like, were there any other Holly Martyns with that spelling, and trying to come up with a distinctive
And was your
name.
grandmother's name spelled with a Y? M-A-R-T-Y?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not an invention.
No, so it was a family name.
Okay.
And I legally took, you can change your name legally, so I did that. And
yep. So you are actually legally Holly Martyn.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was not aware that.
Yeah, no.
I could be arrested for thinking of you as Holly Martyn. I didn't know there was like illegal ramifications.
So no, I mean,
that's why you brought your lawyer.
I just don't want to be reminded of my ex-husband every time. It was time to move on. But
yeah, no,
and it felt like a fresh start, and it felt like I remember just feeling that it was also a way of embracing my writing work.
Right.
Like finally getting to a point psychologically where I was. Are we allowed to swear in here?
Is anybody going to freak out if Holly swears?
No,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You can only go 4 minutes without swearing.
But I'm sure. I mean, I was a student.
We don't fucking care.
Okay, all right. So it's not like this is going to be recorded
It is being recorded, by the way.
It is. Okay.
This is being streamed out to Twitch, just so everybody knows. Right? Is Matt there? Matt? Is the Twitch stream live? Okay, great. Are people piling up in the waiting room in the chat? Greg's there. We love Greg. Yeah, Greg's a big fan. Yeah. Okay, so things you should tell the guest speaker. Yeah, probably so. You're streaming out to Twitch. You may not know what Twitch is.
I don't.
Oh, but Matt, do you want to explain Twitch and what our Twitch stream is? my life could be, my autobiography could be called The Guise of Academic Integrity. Maybe, yeah. Thesis defenses. I can tell, yeah. Yeah, and so this afternoon we were streaming about 6 members of the lab playing a VR game called Zenith, right? Which is so we were all in VR together, killing these elf-like people. Apparently, we just wiped out a village. Like we just came in, they were living there, and I'm like, well, this seems like an evil game. There didn't really seem to be any way to avoid. Like you couldn't win without killing them, so I just killed them.
Was it the Keebler elves?
Well, no, I mean, they looked mean, so it was okay to kill them. I mean, that seems to be what the moral equation is. We were attractive, sort of tall elf people, and they were unattractive, and so they had to die. So that we could take their stuff. Yeah, I mean, it was a real, it's a very enlightened game. I thought we would gather around. Like I thought it was going to be. I'm kind of looking at it like, would this be a fun classroom? Would this be a neat place to teach in VR? But given the genocidal aspect of it, I'm not sure that it's going to be great. So, so we did that this afternoon. Tonight,
So this is report. So I'll be a little more judicious with the F-bomb.
No, don't. I mean, there's no, everything we do is labeled explicit or adult or whatever we have to label in order for me to be as foul-mouthed as I like. And the students are very gracious about it, and they join in, like as my children used to do. They're like, my kids were like, fuck, shit.
Well, where I was going with this was, tying us back into writing a memoir. But originally I had studied fiction like you all have with Pinckney. But I know a lot of the work that you did back when you taught me, and what really resonated with me was getting to a point where I could put my work out into the world and give 0 fucks. And you have to, because you have to be very vulnerable and expose yourself and, risk the slings and arrows of people not liking you, not liking it.
Right, exactly. And people are, back when I first started publishing, which was in the 80s, 1980s, right, like you didn't hear anything. I mean, it was eerie, like, my book went out and, got published and got reviewed, and all you ever heard was reviews. There was no like commentariat. There was no, and so, so if you didn't read reviews, and I've never much read reviews, like you just didn't hear anything. It was kind of great, actually, because I never thought about like, well, will people like this, or, am I going to get in trouble for this in some way, or it just never even occurred to me. I mean, at Iowa, when I was in grad school at Iowa, they really hated my subject matter because they were all writing about, Manhattan, and, it was all sort of, bright lights, big city, and less than zero. And I just wasn't doing that. So they were just like, they couldn't cope with West Virginia. But that didn't like put me off like that. I mean, I just went deeper and deeper into the redneck stuff, just because it bugged my classmates. but that was all I ever heard, right? I mean, you never knew anything about what anybody was thinking about your work. And now it's quite different.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse.
Well, right, I mean,
Yeah.
and so now, right, there are, but one of the differences, and, you know, I want to talk actually about the book for a moment, but, because, you know, I'm very interested in the marketing stuff, right? And one of the things, you know, that I was eager to have you talk to this bunch of folks about, as I say, these are good writers, right? Every person in this class, every person we admit to this program is writing a publishable prose, right? Nobody's writing prose that would just be rejected out of hand for incompetence or what have you. So what I'm trying to do in my classes is prepare them for to help them professionalize, right? And one of the aspects of that MFA programs have never touched, right? And probably didn't at Queens when you and I worked together, was what do you do after you get the degree?
There was just a little bit at the end. I mean, I remember it was sort of tacked on right around the same weekend you graduated.
Right.
Literally like, oh, by the way, here's what you can do for your career.
Yeah, and it's I think it's a disastrous way to approach it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I parted company with Queens is because I was really concerned about the fact that, you know, all these well-published people weren't teaching students, well, what do you do after you get the degree, right?
Yes.
They would just go, well, you know, do what I did and call up your friend at the New Yorker and, you know, and make sure that your friends get
And
you on the show.
there were a handful of those folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it worked out for them, but not everybody has that.
Exactly. And most of us don't. You didn't.
Nope.
Right? I mean, I sort of did. I had Joyce Carol Oates, right?
Yeah.
And so I had a champion who, you know, really, you know, helped me through, but she never gave me any business advice. You know what I mean? She would just send my work to people.
Yes.
You know, and so nothing works like that anymore. It's all, that whole ground has shifted out from under people of my generation, people who published, you know, starting in the 80s and 90s, you know, Fred, all those people at Queens, the ground has shifted out from under their feet in terms of how publishing happens.
Well, and there also has to be, I don't know, there's got to be some accountability in terms of students going into debt, huge debt, to pay for MFAs.
Well, the way we do it, and you all can offer up what you like on this, and please join in the conversation anytime you like. As you can tell, Holly and I have known each other for, I don't know,
a long time
since we were children.
No.
And so we're just going to talk, but you all are free. I know Holly well enough to know she won't mind being interrupted or asked questions. But what we do is we employ these folks for less than minimum wage, essentially, right? Is that fair to say? Right? We exploit their labor as teachers. Each person in this room has a teaching load the same as mine.
Oh, you're kidding. So you're teaching comp and stuff like that?
Yeah, they're teaching red comp, and which is the bane of my existence. And believe me, I got into such a big argument with the department at our last department meeting because I was objecting to that. And because they were all just like, why aren't they enthusiastic about this? I'm like, because they're not red comp people. You know, they were like, you know, the MFA is the most important part of our teaching contingent. I'm like, let them teach what they're trained to do. Well, you know, why wouldn't we just send you over to the school of automotive technology and go, oh yeah, just teach them how to replace a fuel injection system. It just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so we pay them. You can tell I'm well loved in the department and in the school. So we pay them basically a pittance to teach literally the same load I'm teaching.
Wow.
It's crazy. I mean, so they come in. Here's first year? Okay, your first year. So they come in, haven't done any of this before, and they're teaching the same load I'm teaching.
Wow.
But they're teaching, I get to teach them, right? And undergraduates who want to be in my classes. Very pleasant gig, right? People laugh, they're nice. Yeah, they want to be there. They're teaching people who 70% of the time don't want to be there and just hope that they die so that there can be a day or two off, right? And
it's really, that's tough
It's-
teaching.
it's
And then you
brutal.
guys are trying to, I keep saying on the screen, all of you having to have the energy to create new work, which is draining. Then
Hey, Kevin, can you appear, Kevin? Are you visible today?
Oh, I didn't realize my camera was off. Here we go.
Yeah, Kevin is always,
Oh my God.
always it has an interesting representation. I was very eager for you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a clown today.
Ardell.
I was gonna say, I am every day, I just don't advertise it. But,
That's fair. I like to advertise.
yeah, and some of them, so some of them work with me in the lab. I hire as many people as I can
Yeah,
in the lab. It pays the same, but they don't have to do. Matt has worked for me for a couple of years now. Dejanay has just started working in the lab, and so but it's tough. Like being a graduate student here,
yeah,
they're going to be teaching probably this much. We have a really good fellowship that usually one of our students gets in the third year that lets you out of all the teaching. But otherwise, you're teaching a 50% level here for not very much money,
yeah.
right?
But they graduate without huge debt, potentially, or.
I don't know. I mean, how much? I don't. Can you live on what you're making?
I would not have come here if I was gonna go with that.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense, right? I mean, no, that makes sense, and I'm glad. I'm like, I should probably be more grateful that we do subsidize your being here, but I dislike the way we subsidize your being here, and I don't think it does you all much good in your professional futures, and I don't think it's good for the students. Like for you all to have to learn this alien discipline in a week, right, before you then go into the class with people who've never been in college. That just seems to me like an insufferably difficult gig. And so I'm always amazed when my colleagues wonder why morale is not high, amongst the teaching portion of the graduate class. Because we have the best students. The MFA has the best students in the College of Liberal Arts, I will say.
Yeah.
But certainly in the School of Literature, we're the School of Literature, Writing, and Digital Humanities now. And our MFAs are far and away the best graduate students in our school. And they do the bulk of the teaching, and creative writing is the tail that wags the dog here. But the lit people.
Well, and it's important that your students go out having some sense of confidence that they can earn a living or have a plan.
Right.
So you can still practice their art and have a roof over their heads, it's not
Right.
easy to do.
Well, that's,
yeah.
and that's the thing that has been making me crazy for years now, right? Is that we send people out. Now, in the past, we've had a lot of graduate students who I think aren't very interested in professionalizing,
Yeah.
right? They're just, upper middle class kids who have 3 years to waste, right? And some creative writing or English teacher told them they should be a writer in their, sophomore year. And, and they're just here kind of biding time and, and that kind of thing. And I mean, I hate those people with a white hot passion. Well, because somebody serious could be there, right?
Yeah, no, it's.
Because, people get here and, and like a year before they were begging me to get in, and then they come here and they're like, ooh, fuck this, I'm like, what are you doing? Like you were begging me to come here. This was your dream, when I called you to tell you were let in.
Well, that's, as you know, people romanticize writing. I did it myself. I don't anymore. I mean, I still love it.
Well, you're a working writer, right? I mean, you might as well have on a hard hat.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, that I think what's helped me somewhat, publishing my first book sort of later in life was my first career within business on Wall Street. I actually had always wanted to be a writer, but I came from a family where I couldn't afford to do an MFA, and I also didn't have the confidence to be a writer at that point. I did dabble in some journalism, but not to do creative writing. So by the time I started writing seriously in my late 30s, which was around when I met you, and my sort of niche on Wall Street was in marketing. So by the time I graduated, and as I've been going through this process of trying to figure out how to not only promote my book, but also promote myself as a writer, I found that my writing background was really helpful. And I over time in a business career, you learn, don't be ashamed to talk about money, and don't be ashamed to stand up for your rights and those kinds of things. I found it really interesting because I've also been trying to turn my book into a television series, and I have some connections and have an agent, and I had written a pilot for the book, and there were some initial discussions with entertainment lawyers and so forth. And what was really interesting to me was just how quickly a lot of those folks are ready to swoop right in and give the writer a tiny little piece, and they assume you don't know what you're doing. They assume that you are too naive, too afraid to understand what does a contract really mean? What does it, what is, who owns the rights to this work? Who's going to profit from it? And, thankfully, I got in there and scrapped it out because I had that background and confidence, but I think most people don't.
Well, I mean, in a way, you and I are sort of opposite ends on this. I mean, not like, I mean, just in terms of our nature, or whatever, because I had a translation of a book of my stories just came out in Spain this past week. And I'll show you the cover, you'll love it. It's a really cool cover. And so it came out, and I was kind of, talking about it on, LinkedIn or whatever. And Laura, my wife, she said, "Do you have a contract with these people?" And I was like, "I must." They publish my stories, right? I mean, I do. I went and looked it up, and yeah, there it is. And and they actually paid me for it, and that kind of thing. But I just do not track that stuff. Right, like I kind of get myself in trouble that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's this. I mean, as I've learned, there's this whole layer of people in society who are skimming, doing more than skimming. They're taking. Right. We are all writing and working hard, and perhaps not getting the full benefit of financial remuneration.
No, definitely not. Right? Yeah, definitely not.
I mean, what was I remember. And we can back into the PR discussion, but one of the things that I was really shocked by was I got pulled into a major New York publishing house, and I had finally submitted my manuscript. They'd asked for it, and I went in, and this woman sat with me, and before she really gave me feedback on what she thought of my book, she said, "I want you to tell me all the celebrities that you know. Can you give me their names?" So she was wanting to know how easy was this going to be for them, right, to just have me do a lot of the work for them.
Yeah.
And
well, so let's find out. How many celebrities do you know?
I don't know. Well, go ahead.
Greg is the guy we met in front of and he's our only streaming person. He watches our stream religiously. Sweet. Hi, Greg. Oh, I'm not on camera. Oh, well. So Greg, so that's good. But I mean, he's one of those marginal celebrity characters who knowing him does you as much harm as good. But right, like that's a weird question.
Yeah, I was like,
right?
Well, what did you think of the story? It was a real eye opener, and it's not. It in some ways it sort of lays bare the ugly reality of the publishing world, right? The margins are so thin, so they want to know, is this going to be a blockbuster? And particularly since I've never published before, it's even tougher because they don't always want to make a bet on a first-time writer. So
Yeah, I mean, and often if they do make a bet on a first-time writer, what they do is they throw a ton of money at you,
yeah,
and then they sort of, and unless the stars align, and Britney Spears appears nude in public with your book between her teeth, right? Like,
Yeah.
when nothing happens, when nothing miraculous happens, then they'll just kind of drop the book.
yeah,
Right, and they'll, and people will have 2 and 3 book contracts, and the second and third books just get disappeared, right? Because the first book didn't do, the business that they paid you that $250,000, right? So it is a business where, as we talked about William Goldman last week, right? And as he says in Adventures in the Screen Trade, true also, I think, in the publishing business is nobody knows anything. Right. And so, I mean, if they could tell whether something was going to be a big hit or not, they wouldn't bother with the ones that aren't. Right.
yeah,
And so but they have this kind of fantasy, that they understand, elements that no one, you couldn't model them, right? You couldn't simulate them because they're too complex, and so but they try to get the stars to align in these weird ways, like how many Twitter followers do you have?
right, or
Right.
your Instagram or all of that, but even
Right.
that, they also understand that
It's
it
not a predictor.
doesn't necessarily
Doesn't
translate
translate.
into a book sale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, if you're a TikTok star,
Yeah,
it's worthwhile on TikTok, right? But being a TikTok star doesn't mean you're going to be big on Twitter, and it sure as hell doesn't mean you're going to sell a lot of books. At the same time, if you go to a publisher and you say, I've got 12 million views, on TikTok or whatever, then it cuts ice with them, strangely. Although, I mean, because
but people who watch video don't necessarily pick up a book and read.
yeah,
Right?
I mean,
So it just,
but that's right. I mean,
Yeah.
you're a marketing person, right? It's that,
Yeah,
how do you make the conversion,
yeah,
right? How do you make the conversion from a Twitter follower or, somebody on Facebook or what, wherever, how do you make that conversion into somebody who purchases the book?
yeah,
And there's just no correspondence, right? I mean, there are people who are famous and who have sort of big followers but who knows what the Venn diagram is of the people who follow them on Instagram and the people who buy their products, right? Yeah, so it's crazy. Like, I see people trying to figure out these like spells or whatever, like, if we can get enough, celebrities behind this or whatever. So how did you answer the question? How many did you
well, at that
list?
point, I
Because I know you know famous
I knew
people,
a few, but
right?
not well enough to know with 100% certainty that they might help me. But I think the other interesting piece of this I can share with you guys that was really helpful to me is, I guess I finally, so the name of my book, which came out the same week as the pandemic. Let me know. Yeah, it's like exactly within a couple of days, which is another story. I'm gonna have to remarket the book, I think. But so a friend of mine who had managed rock stars, I actually wrote about this in my blog. He had managed Steven Tyler and rock stars, and so he sort of had this different idea of how to manage a literary or any kind of an artistic career. It's like, you got to think of yourself as a commodity, and you have to create publicity for yourself. And at that point, I didn't have a book contract, and I don't know if I was even on Instagram. I mean, I've always been one of these people that don't really even like social media. I thought naively that if I just write a nice book, I can live like a hermit and somebody will find it and it will just sell.
A lot of people in this room are like, are like, isn't that how it happened?
Yeah, no, exactly. They're just, it's just
No, we all have that.
the
right?
elves
Yeah.
will show up at your door and sell the book for you.
And but you have to kill them. That's what I'm finding out. When the elves come to your door, wipe them out, destroy their village, take their stuff. I'm level 3. I mean, I just wouldn't be level 3 if I didn't do that.
Oh gosh. So this guy says, okay, and I was fortunate that I afford to throw a little bit of money at this. So he's like, no, we're gonna do pre-publicity for you. He's like, you need to start promoting yourself. Are we running out of
No,
time?
you're fine. I'm enjoying our conversation, so
Okay,
I lose track of time, so I want to.
okay, so you just tell me when to shut up and we can.
I
do what's
will,
funny.
I will stand up and scream.
Okay.
Shut up, Molly!
So,
Jesus Christ!
so I said, well, how much would it cost to, get publicity? And so I got a few contracts, or, I got bids, and it's a staggering amount of money. It's anywhere from, I shouldn't say staggering, but it's not cheap. It's anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 to get publicity. So I'm originally from Canada, so then I had this, this idea that I bet you I could get it cheaper up in Canada. I did.
But you get the Canadian version, which smells like back bacon and beans on toast.
No, I found this really good agency, and they have people in the US, and so you get
So
all-
it's fine.
you get both, you get Canada and the US for half the price. So I thought I'll give it a shot, and sure enough, it was so the next thing that the rock star dude says, Holly, you need media training. Do you guys know about this? Like they teach you how to be on TV, how to answer questions, all this kind of stuff. So then I had to pay a former New York City news anchor. I don't know. I think I paid her wasn't cheap again, $1,000, something like that. And she spent all day with me in a room, and she said, "All right, tell me your book," And she started to teach me how to very quickly tell the story of my book and sell myself. Told me, make sure you sit the right way in the chair so your calves don't look fat. She told me all these crazy tips,
Yeah,
right?
good
All
luck for
these
me.
things.
I'm just like, yeah, I want her to teach me how to sit so I don't look fat. That'd be nice.
So
She's just like, yeah, I know.
So, so
We're
she-
a refrigerator mom.
yeah, so then she said, all right, you're done. You know enough to be dangerous. And so this PR company, they got me some TV. But what really made the difference for me was that the Huffington Post submitted some kind of a story or angle about me to their relationship editor. And it was picked up and it went sort of national, got tons of press. And so suddenly I had a television production company in Los Angeles contacting me saying, tell me about your book. Maybe we want it. And they were coming to me. And then I was like, well, the book's not finished yet. So but it was an interesting thing to see that, if you time it right, and if you can find ways, but
Like
not,
right at the beginning of a pandemic.
yeah, well, no, I just time it right if you wanted to start to promote yourself, but
Right, didn't wait for the book to come out or to be about to come out before you began to prepare yourself to be a
Yes.
public person.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it does take a lot of time. And, some people love doing this kind of stuff. They love self-promotion, love being on TV and podcasts. I don't really. I did discover I like radio. That's it. Because you never have to do your hair or your makeup. You just shoot your mouth off.
That's what I love about
and then
radio
you hang up
too.
the phone and you talk.
I can have whatever kind of hair I want on radio.
Exactly.
So you should see my glorious locks.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's easy. You don't have to travel. Oh, and that's the other thing too is you're having to schlep on airplanes and it's hard work. It's a lot of energy and it can be fun. But not to despair. The other night I was having dinner in DC with a friend of mine who works in public relations, and I was telling her about that we're going to have this talk, and we started talking about public relations, and she said, well, of course, there's the paid public relations, which we just talked about, which I paid for it, and then she said, there's earned PR, which would be, like that You see that reporter recently who was on live on air and got hit by a car on air and recovered. So she ended up suddenly became this national sensation because people were coming to her, and so that promoted her in her career through happenstance. Or if you're like a Sully and you land your plane on the Hudson River and no one gets wet, you become famous that way. So that's earned. Or you could also sort of run your own digital account and become more of a self-promoter. So this friend of mine, she was telling me to suggest to you all that depending on what your area of specialty is, it may not always translate perfectly for fiction, but she said there is a website, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, it's called actually it's called Help a Reporter. So you sign up and you could find some area of specialty, whatever that is, and then you get paired up with national reporters. And so that can be a way of, whatever angle of the story, you could somehow start to build some momentum that way. And another thing you can do is pitch stories locally to your local press. A lot of television stations, radio, they're understaffed and they're always needing local content. So, it's a way to start to build a name for yourself. And I think it's really important. I mean, that's what publishers are looking for. That's what agents are looking for. Because it's also demonstrating your ability to promote yourself. That you're not going to just be a bump on the line.
Right, you're not a stiff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, because the last thing they want is to set up, you're on Good Morning America and you go on, and you're like a deer in the headlights and, and that kind of thing.
And a lot of these big, and I know this because I almost got on the Today Show right before the pandemic.
I remember.
And they want to know, are you media trained? And then they ask for a video of you, like a little clip to show if you've done other television. So, it's just, it was something we all have to embrace. Some people love it and
right.
And some
But
of us don't.
is it fair to say there's very little about the business of publishing, right? So we're saying beyond the writing, right? Which of course, that's what we do here and it's what we care about and that kind of thing. But not to no end. It is not an organic process, right? Or at least for you, it was not, just sort of like lucking into things or, right? That you were very intentional about creating your professional persona. We talked about choosing your name. Right. About getting yourself trained so that you could represent yourself to the people who hope to make money off of you as a trained person and worth the investment of their time and energy.
Exactly.
Right. But it's not, I remember as a kid being really shocked when I realized it was like my Santa Isn't Real moment. When I realized oh my God, people don't just go on the Johnny Carson show because Johnny likes them and they like him, they're all, they all have a movie coming out or, they all have a TV show or a book. And I remember just my mind being blown, oh my God, this thing that I thought was just conversation between fabulously attractive and funny, witty people. It was all scripted. It was all rehearsed. You know what I mean? It wasn't people just dropping in David Letterman. You know what I mean? It wasn't just people dropping in. And that was, it was kind of a scalding moment, right?
Yeah. And it's a well-oiled machine. I mean, I saw that even just as my book was coming out that, so my publisher had their own their own PR department. And then I also hired a literary PR person and they worked together just to kind of pump it up. And they all had the same lists. They all, it's like you send the sample copies to this, it's all, I don't try to think of the best way to say it. It's just a well-oiled machine and you have to know who's on that list and it has to be sent by a certain date. And it's just how it's done. And it's a very small, connected little world.
Yeah, no, it's very small world,
Yeah.
right? Did you, well, I'm not gonna use names. I was gonna ask you about an editor who was frequently at Queens and whether you had met her or not, but I will refrain since we're on a live stream and you actually have a reputation. You actually have to live in the world. I'm a tenured professor. I can slime anybody I like. So, but no, it really is. I mean, you know, our mutual friend, Adrienne, right? I mean,
Yes.
you know, she's been part of that machine at various,
Yeah.
right? She founded a magazine. She, you know, she wrote a novel. She became an editor at Houghton Mifflin. Now, you know, and you know, her book, like it was, I remember every time I logged on to Amazon there for a while, her book was like the book. You all may have seen it advertised by a woman named Adrienne Brodeur, and it was called Wild Game, and it was about her being the go-between between her mother and her mother's lover. Right. But I mean, she did, you know, a lot of the same sort of things you're talking
But she
about.
had a bigger publishing house behind her.
Well, right, I
Really
mean,
profound, yeah.
Right. But I mean, she's been in that business,
Yes.
you know, for 30 years. So she just has, you know, she knows everybody, you know, and she runs, you know, a big chunk of the Aspen Institute.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, that's right. Like everybody you know in Aspen has a $30 million house. Like I went out to their writers conference one summer, not because I was famous enough to go, but because the guy they were bringing in from Canada apparently was dumb enough to tell the people he was coming in that he was going to do business in the US, and they like turned him away. They just said, no, you can't do that. You can't go to the US to do business. So she called me, like it was like Saturday, and the thing started the next day. I was actually on a motorcycle. I was taking a motorcycle ride and I smoked. And she called and said, can you come do a fiction class for us? And I'm like, well, I don't know. She was like, we can get you a flight out of Knoxville. I guess I was about 2 hours out of Knoxville. So I cranked the throttle and jumped on a plane. And so, but anyway, I went out there and it was just bizarre, right? Like, you know, for somebody like me, you know, in that world of, you know, well-known writers and, you know, and stuff like that. I mean, it was hilarious. But it's a whole different world.
You're being humble. You are incredibly well respected.
Well,
For
yeah,
years.
I'm what's known as a writer's writer, right? Which just means that all that means is that nobody except writers has ever heard of me or read anything I've written. But you know, it's fine, right? I mean, it's the niche I'm apparently suited, since I can't read contracts. It's apparently the niche I am fated to occupy. But no, it was fun. Like, you know, it was really interesting because I'm not a celebrity
Yeah, it
writer.
is that.
And to be among the celebrity writers was hilarious.
It is kind of a club.
I clearly did not belong in any picture I was a part of.
Well, and I don't want to be overly negative about it either.
No,
But I don't want to be negative about it. It's just be realistic that it is difficult. I can say too that you just never know who can help you. And best instance I can think of that was I was living in Connecticut, you know, in just a smaller town, and was talking to my neighbor who I didn't know that well while my dog was doing his business. And she says, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm writing a book. And she kept asking me more questions. And she's this older, unassuming lady. And she's like, oh, my sister is so-and-so in LA, and she has the best agent. Do you want me to call her?
Yeah.
And she did. And I developed a rapport with this wonderful nonfiction agent.
But it doesn't.
It was just like that.
But it doesn't happen in the way that, like, you know, so it's not sort of like, well, you're virtuous and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen in this kind of incremental way that I think in academia we often pretend things do. right?
Yeah.
Like sit down and just concentrate on the work and, fame will take care of itself, right?
Yeah.
And all that means is
You
that
can
you're
have an
gonna.
amazing book, but maybe no one will ever know about it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And what good does it do,
Mhm.
right, if nobody ever knows what you wrote
Yeah.
or what you did? So no, I don't think it's negative at all, right? I mean, but I do think it's one of the things I want to bring into an MFA program. And again, this was the problem with Queens, right? Was I couldn't do it. I wasn't allowed to do it. That, what I want to bring in is that reality.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I mean, because, if you were, if these folks wanted to be, work construction, I would tell them like, a jackhammer, you're going to be crippled, right? If you become a jackhammer operator, 10 years from now, you're not going to be able to straighten out, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
and that's not bad. It's just, it's just like, know that,
Yeah.
go in with your eyes open. Because naivete only gets you so far. And,
Mhm.
and again, I say that as somebody who doesn't care about his contracts, but that's, I've never been able to establish a brand like, me, like the minute I feel it, the minute I'm
Your
getting,
brand is the unbrand.
yeah, my brand is like, you don't know what he's gonna
No
do.
brand.
Yeah, he may come in here and give a lecture, he may come in and machine gun us all.
And that's a risk we're willing to take.
Who knows what he's gonna do? Is he writing? Is he doing VR? So yeah, it's I'm not sufficiently disciplined. Like you are, I think Laura is, she's very disciplined, right? I mean, like 8 novels now.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and so I learned a lot about commercial publishing through her.
Yeah.
Right? Because she's been in contact with all these people, right? I mean, her first publisher was Mark Tabani and, all these, sort of godlike people. It's like, did your husband die? Like, I remember hearing about it in the 90s. Yeah, is he dead? It's like, no, he's just a professor now. So, anyway, yeah, I don't think it's bad or good, right? I mean, it's just you're a professional,
Yeah.
right? Talking to people who want to be professionals. And I think it's really important to say, like, first of all, I would say enjoy your MFA, because this is the only time you sort of get to live like this, right? You get to live like a writer and talk about, writing over dinner. I mean, because there's very little of that in the world, right? I mean, even for writers, right?
Yes, it's true. And then maybe start to lay the
But
seeds, and even
but
now, I
have
mean,
something going
Yeah.
before you get out of it,
Yeah.
right? Like have somebody who expects your work on their desk, who's excited about it, and right before you leave here, create some kind of professional, like use this to pave your road out of this program.
Yeah.
Right? Because it really is, graduation from here is going to be like falling off a cliff,
Yeah.
right? It's just going to be like, oh my God, nobody's reading my work anymore. Well, guess what? We're not being paid to,
Well, and I think, and too, I think you should follow the sort of traditional path. Like, what's the big conference? Is it AWP?
AWP,
Yeah. So
it's like AWWP, but they never picked up that second W.
Yeah.
Like, it was a dumb move.
So,
Yeah.
so go do that conference, but also think broadly. Like, think about, you don't necessarily want to go and try to meet agents where there's 2 agents there and there's 500 people.
Right.
Like I've tried to think, okay, where else am I going to meet publishing people? So there's like the Frankfurt Book Fair. Yeah, not everybody can jump on a plane and go to Frankfurt, but if you did, and I bet if you hung out in Frankfurt for a few days at the conference, you'd probably make a
Well, it's
lot of.
weirdly easy to meet people.
Yeah, you'll meet
And I
people
think
and you
particularly for
never know.
young people, right? Like,
Yeah.
old people like young people. It's just no, it is. It's just nice. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not so decrepit that I'm invisible to people under 30 or whatever, right? I mean, it's easier. Like if I just sidle up to people and like, hey, yeah, I want to get to know me, like that, that weirds them out, even in Frankfurt. And but it's sort of less weird coming from a young writer. Right. When I go, hey, I'm a really big fan. I'm a super fan. Yeah, everybody gets weirded.
But I think sort of creatively about
Yeah,
do the
well,
traditional stuff and then
and one
think
of-
of your own route too, that's a little wacky.
well, and see, one of the
Yeah.
advantages I think folks have here, right, is that we've got the digital humanities lab, right? Like
Yeah.
we've got you know, one of the things that they do in really all of their fiction classes here is create sort of digital value add for their fiction, right? So if you send a story out, you've also got a well-produced audio version
Okay.
of the story that the publisher can put on their webpage and link and stuff like that. And, you know, and when they apply for jobs, they're able to say, yes, I have my MFA, but, you know, I also, you know, I've spent time working in the lab. Mac, for instance, you know, worked with, did VR for the health management program for a while. You know, we've got folks with a lot of different aspects to their discipline. So it's, you know, we're just trying to make that skill stack a little more interesting and a little more contemporary than most creative writing programs are doing, right? Because it doesn't, when you say think creatively, I mean, the deal is the game industry is bigger than the movie industry, right? Like, and we don't think, well, writers, but I mean, of course, writers produce all of that stuff. And most of it is miserably bad. Like the people in this room, if the people in this room had played Zenith, the Last City, the thing we played this afternoon, early on, they'd have said, you know, this first level where you you have to go wipe out the native people and burn their town. Could we rethink that? And maybe the story we tell could be like fun and interesting and a little less brutal. You know what I mean? You know, maybe a little less Cortez. You know, so they obviously they need people who are right. They need writers. They need people who know what a good story is.
Yes.
Right. And
Storytellers.
yeah, exactly.
But with
And storytellers are like, when I tell people what we're doing here, you know, we've got people from Verizon who are interested in our graduates, right? We've got, you know, because it's you know, I think we're you know, we're trying, like I say, we're just trying to stack those things in an innovative way, right? In a creative way, so that they, because you know, what I tell these folks, and it's, you know, it's just true, right? Is like, if their story lands on an editor's desk the same day as a story from somebody at Iowa does, right? They're not going to get read. The story from Iowa is going to get read because those people have the connections, right? They're, you know, that school is known. And so we have to be on different people's desks, right? But luckily, like the people at Iowa aren't writing romance, right? The people at Iowa, and you know, Mandy Jurgen, right? I mean, Mandy's a romance writer. Like she has a whole second career as Bella Scott. You know that, right? Yeah, and so she's written four novels as Bella Scott. She's published 8 or 9 novels as herself. Like, you know, I mean, you know, she's a female. Yeah, and so because we're agnostic about subject matter in a way the sort of lordly programs aren't, right? And because we're willing to say like, oh, video games aren't the devil. I mean, it gets me, you know, shunned at cocktail parties, but or maybe something else that gets me shunned at cocktail parties. But it is like, I think it's the only way forward for people who come from what's frankly a working class school, right? And there's just no, because there's no, you know, like you say, you didn't know people in that world, and I know you come from a working class background in Canada. Right. And so, you know, it's, you know, it's having to figure out like, how do I break into a world that is very insular, right? Where everybody knows everybody.
Actually, I have another example. I just thought of, do you know Zibby Owens?
I don't.
So she started a podcast called Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. And she originally focused on books for mothers, but then she started to build a whole empire. So she built up this whole collection of podcasts. She started becoming she somehow got on the list, but so then people would put her on Good Morning America and get her to give her, top 10 beach reads or whatever. Then she sort of expanded it into other areas. She's now got her own publishing house. She's now spun off the podcasts and selling that to, an own separate media company. But originally she wanted to be a writer. And she has, I think she's edited a few anthologies, and I think she's finally come out with her own memoir.
But see, like, that's a great way to start.
Backed into it.
Yeah. I mean, someone who's known in this program, a graduate of this program, is a guy named Josh Woods, who has a successful podcast called The Monster Professor. Yeah. And literally he just talks about monsters with monster experts. And he's gotten to know, like, he had the 3 top Tolkien experts in the world on his show, like Tom Shippey and Michael Drout and Corey Olson, right? Who are like, I mean, because so if you do that kind of thing that you're interested in, all of a sudden you end up meeting, right, like world-class people. But like what he did while he was here was he published anthologies. Yeah. Right. His first anthology was called the Versus Anthology. It was just a great idea. He asked people he knew to write quite short pieces about blank versus blank. Right. Huh. So and he wrote Jesus versus Thor, which it's a great story, right? Because it's a very serious. He's not ideologically or he's not ideologically religious, but he knows a lot about religion, so he takes them very seriously. And so, as a Christian, I read this and I recognize like that is the Christ of Revelation, right? And then I read the other, and I'm like, and that is really like Thor, right? Like that's and he just put the 2 things together, and then so we all a whole bunch of us just did that, right? We just said, oh, this versus that. Some sort of primal
battle.
Yeah, and for me, like it was the first time I ever did a comic, right? And mine was called Orgo versus the Flatlanders, which was about the battle between people who live in the mountains and people who live in the flatlands, which is a battle the people who live in the flatlands don't have any idea is happening, right? Like they never know because the people in the mountains are so ineffective about what they're doing, but they hate the people of the flatlands. Like, I mean, I just grew up thinking, Flatlanders was a curse in my family, right? Like, God, that's what the Flatlanders all do. Moving out here, my family was like, what are you doing? So anyway, it's a war, right? But Flatlanders are always shocked. You go like, yeah, the people who live in the mountains goddamn hate you. And they're like, what? Why? I'm like, because they live in the mountains and you're Flatlanders. They're like, what the hell is that? Like, and I'm like, you don't understand. You didn't grow up here. No. So anyway, I think I was going somewhere with this. So yeah, he did that, and he just put together a bunch of
backing into a writing career,
cool anthologies, right.
Being somehow involved in
being a ring giver, right? I mean, being able to invite people onto your podcast, being able to invite people to be in an anthology. Susan Henderson did a newsletter that became a blog that became a really influential, critical compendium for years. And she has 2 novels now because she just got to know everybody, right? So, okay, well, let's take a break. This has been very enjoyable. It's just fun to see you again, by the way.
Great to see you.
Yeah. How long has it been since we actually were in a room together?
Was it in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, that's right. It was at
your musical.
Yes, yeah, it was
at. Know that your other talents. Tell them about what you did with your friend. It was incredible. You had it was an opera.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, it was.
Wrote an opera.
Yeah. We wrote an opera based on the Scarlet Letter.
Wow.
And we had a concert version of it performed in D.C. in Holly.
What was the military base?
To come, yeah, it was at Fort Myer.
That's right,
which is right across from because my friend and he and I are actually collaborating on a bunch of VR stuff. But he's a composer, a guy I grew up with, in West Virginia. And he was a command sergeant major who ran a thing called the Army Blues, which is the Army jazz band stationed at Fort Myer. So mostly what he did was like he would wear tux and go like play piano at like Dick Cheney's house, and they wouldn't give him anything to drink. I mean, he's just like he's like, oh my God, he's like, I'm gonna give myself tendonitis hour after hour. He's just like, I'm gonna pass out. And yeah, they invited him to teach piano to the Obama guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he was like, he just, when he thought about all the security stuff, he's just like, not worth it, not gonna do that. But anyway, so yeah, we wrote a musical based on the Scarlet Letter because you don't have to pay, you don't have to pay anything to dead 19th century writers. So, and it was really,
it was absolutely fantastic.
it was a really weird project because we, like I say, neither of us has any goddamn sense, or we'd be way wealthier than we are because we're really good at what we do, but we're both just
Like,
like,
why isn't this on Broadway now?
Yeah, well,
Have you heard of
part of it
Hamilton?
is because we took as much of the Hawthorne prose literally as we could. Like our songs are, and it's weird how Hawthorne actually does lay himself out reasonably as lyrics, and a lot of it's just unsingable. Like, I mean, there's this one thing where it's this song that's in 5/4 time, and this woman has to sing. What is the lyric? Bitter tempered spinster, that is what they call me. Sour discontented lady, and she was just like, I fucking hate you. Bitter tempered spinster, Anyway, so yeah, we had a very pure idea. We've actually written most of another opera that's about Poe. It's about Edgar Allan Poe. Like, his death was really weird, right? And so we've written what happened to him in the night before he was discovered in the gutter in Baltimore.
That sounds really
Based on,
interesting.
and it's like we do the whole story of Cask of Amontillado in a song. Like, and it's a really cool song too. So, will we ever finish it? Who knows? We're
Finish it and sell it.
well, that would be yes, I should do that. I remember Jerry Stern, the poet Jerry Stern, when I was a graduate student. I was at a party at Iowa with Jerry, and he asked me about something that I had written, and it was like I just said, I haven't done anything with it. I remember he literally, this was back when writers were very physical people. He grabbed me by the shirt and kind of pulled me to him, and he goes, "It's not doing anybody any fucking good sitting in a drawer." And I was like, and apparently it just frightened me so bad I just put stuff in drawers. It didn't have the intended effect, which I think was to do. When you say it, it's more persuasive than when Jerry does. Plus, he's dead.
Well,
okay. Well, so let's take a break. Obviously, our that's the devil's chord or something like that. I think it was actually illegal for a while. But let's take a break. I'm going to make an assignment. Clearly, like I say, tonight's schedule is a little different from what it was, but I want us to take. It's almost 6:30 now, so why don't we take until let's take until 10 till 7, say, and everybody here and everybody there. What I want you to do, and are you able to hang around? I know I didn't say it was going to be all night, but if you can hang around, I would love to have you. What I want you to do is I want you, and this could be about something you're actually working on, something you thought about working on, or something you just make up for the occasion, but I want you to write a really compelling pitch for a book, and I want you to pitch your book to Holly, right? Because Holly knows about pitches. Holly has pitched books. She has pitched TV shows, right? She's learned how to pitch herself. Yeah, she knows how to sell things. And she'll be able to tell whether your pitch is bullshit or crazy or, and help you fine tune it and figure it out. Now, if they're gonna write a pitch, what elements do you want that pitch to have? And literally, it can be anything.
So this is a book pitch. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I
like an
think so. I
elevator.
mean, like, let's make it just say a narrative project, right?
Okay, so it
Could be a podcast, could be
still
a,
needs to be an elevator pitch, right? So
yeah,
it's
it needs to be really sharp.
It's gotta grab you in the first two sentences.
Okay,
really,
and
right?
so
And you
so
can
you want
literally
like
imagine you're in an elevator, you run into the
okay, so
executive.
let's say that's what it's gonna be.
Yeah.
Is you've stumbled into an elevator with Holly and you don't know who
Well,
she is.
let's make it somebody
Just
better, like,
recognizing that Holly
who's
is
the
a superior
ultimate
being.
agent? Who's the ultimate literary agent?
Yeah, well, yeah, or like, okay, so yeah, you're Barbara Jones, okay?
Yes.
All right, you're Barbara Jones.
And she's like, what are you working on?
Yeah, okay. Barbara Jones will never say that, but to any of us.
And then they have to come up with something and nail it.
Right, and nail it before that elevator gets to the bottom floor. I'm gonna time the elevator run. And you have that moment to charm this industry professional. Okay? And this is the kind of thing you should always have on the tip of your tongue. You should always be ready to do this. Like whenever anybody comes to me and says, do you want, we have this, like today, I got approached by the medical school and they're like, we're doing this project. They've said we need CG to do it. We didn't know what CG was. It turns out it's computer generated imagery. Like, do you do that? What? I don't know. I assume they want 3D models of like lungs or something. I'm like, yeah, I can find that, sure. So I'm like, yeah, we'll collaborate with you. It's a medical school. They got a ton of money, right? Like, so yeah, so I made my pitch about, digital storytelling and right? And it's the way I've built this lab. It's just whenever anybody proposes something, right? I just, I have like my 3 things that I can tick off, and then I put them in a VR headset, and they're just like, oh shit, oh yeah, we want a piece of this. Yeah. So, but it's always right. Always be closing. ABC. Always be ready to close. Always be ready to shift your ground to to understand what people are asking for, right? Because a lot of the problems that graduate students have, and you may recognize this from yourself, if I remember the early days, is a kind of over-determinism, right? Imagining you know what you want to do and what you can do well, and then hearing everybody who talks to you as though they were asking about that, right? When in fact, they're asking something for their own advantage.
Yeah.
And they don't want to hear the story of your advantage. They want to hear how that story that you're thinking about is to their advantage. Is that a fair way to state that?
I think so. They're putting it through their lens of what they think is going to sell. Or I'm thinking
Right.
of a meeting I had in Los Angeles after that Huffington Post story came out, and I met by myself. I didn't know what I was doing with a guy who was in charge of content for a studio, and I just sort of intuitively quickly started telling him some fast, funny stories about me and why, and the things that I write about, and I watched his face, and I could, you have to read your audience,
Right.
but quickly to be able to
Get the ring, right.
and to be adaptable and dart in one direction or
Right,
another, depending
exactly.
on what your audience.
Like broken field running. And
Yeah,
if you're too deterministic about what you want to do,
yeah,
it's very hard to actually listen to other people, right? Or to watch them or to understand their reactions, to shift things, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's exactly, one last story before we go, but when I was a young writer, right? So again, back in the 1980s, my agent, my first book had come out, it was reasonably well received. And my agent had gotten me, so I was working on my second book of stories, and my agent had got me a meeting with Alice Turner. And Alice Turner was the longtime fiction editor at Playboy. And Playboy was the place where the first rank of writers dumped their lesser stories, right? Because they love to be able to say, we've got a story by, John Updike. And it was always lesser effect and stuff like that. But for a guy like me, it was a real step up, and it paid money, right? And people read it and stuff like that. So I'm having this meeting with Alice Turner, and she goes, "Listen," she says, "we really want to publish your work." And I forget. I mean, they paid like $3,000-4,000, like. And
That
in
was a lot.
1988, that's a fuckload of money.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm living, anyway. So we're, I'm in West Virginia, anyway. So, and I'm like, oh, okay. And she goes, the one rule we have, the one thing that we cannot do, she says, you can have murders, you can have any kind of thing you want in your stories, but do not kill an animal, because our readers will freak out if you kill an animal. We will get so many angry letters. And I'm like, Alice, I'm your boy. I'm so gonna send you the next thing I write.
Oh,
So I sit down and write.
You did
I
it.
sit down and write a story, and the first thing that happens is a big beef hauler full of stock steers goes off a cliff. So I immediately start with the death of like 40 beeves. The next story I write, the main character swats a parrot off of its stand. I'm like, my God, what is wrong with me? It's the imp of the perverse. And in my second book, there's not a story in which an animal does not die. I'm just like, what? I stare success in the face and I just go.
So did you end up submitting a story?
To Alice? No, I never did. That was my agent's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, the first thing that happens is a state trooper goes around putting his pistol into the ear of these cattle. What's wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know, man. It's life as I see it. It's my heart. My heart demands the death of these animals. But in fact, it was just my resistance to any kind of success or money. Okay, very good. Oh, Jody Salazar is in the waiting room. Now that I've talked all that time, let's go till 5 after 7 and come back and be prepared to pitch Holly hard. Yeah? Okay? Very good. For any kind of project you want.